there was a lot of tragedy that happened while we were all celebrating the new year, while we was enjoying what was happening out here in these streets. Over in Japan, they were hit with an earthquake that apparently triggered a tsunami warning. Take a look and let me bring you up to date of what's going on out here in these Japanese streets.
A quiet New Year's Day in the coastal city of Suzu on Japan's west coast. Then a major earthquake hits. Just inland on a residential street, a man struggles to keep upright. Seconds later, the roof of a house splits apart. In the street behind, a building collapses, sending up a cloud of dust. In the subway, the platforms start to rock. And then the lights go out. Above ground in Myoko, a ski resort, frightened tourists are caught in their vans and cars. The 7.6 quake in the Sea of Japan, close to Ishikawa Prefecture, is the largest recorded in the Noto Peninsula since records began. A tsunami warning was issued and people living along hundreds of miles of coast have been told to move to higher ground. A 1-metre wave reached the coast 10 minutes after the earthquake, but there is a warning of a 3-metre tsunami for the Noto region.
It's absolute chaos that's happening over in Japan. And Japan is actually one of the cities that was on my bucket list. It was at the very, very top of my bucket list of places to visit last year. And I had an opportunity to spend like 7 to 10 days in Japan or something like that over in Tokyo. And I had a great time. And so I plan on visiting Japan at least once every few years just to get refreshed, just to see what's happening in the culture. They have a great sense of fashion. They got great culture. It's different people there. They all respect what's happening. They don't even have trash cans, but there's not an ounce of trash on the street. It is a great place to visit. But even though Japan is at the top of my list as far as the places that I would live in outside of the United States, this just shows you that no matter where you pick, there's always going to be issues. Even here within the United States, right? If you go over to the West Coast, you got to deal with water shortages, droughts, earthquakes, mudslides, all kind of crap over there. If you live over on the East Coast, but they got great weather, right? Over on the West Coast. You live over on the East Coast, you got to deal with snow, you got to deal with, if you're in the South, you got to deal with hurricanes. If you're up in the Midwest, you probably got to deal with some tornadoes. If you're in Chicago, you got to deal with O-Block. So everybody, we're going to get there in a minute. Everybody somewhere is dealing with something that may not necessarily be the best of environments. It's going to be a trade-off. It's a yin and a yang everywhere.
Japan's Prime Minister told people to leave.
I'd
like to ask all residents to continue to pay close attention to this strong earthquake. If you're in a region where a tsunami is expected, please evacuate as soon as possible.
That's not always straightforward.
It's crazy.
I'm trying to evacuate, but the road is blocked, says this woman filming close to the epicenter. She says her house is destroyed. This time, the threat of a major tsunami has passed, a relief for a country with painful memories of 2011 and the earthquake and tsunami which resulted in the deaths of 18,000 people and the
Do y'all remember, I don't know if anybody was remember, because a lot of times we don't really pay attention to the things that go on outside of what's happening in our city, let alone the United States. But I went back a lot of times, like on a regular basis, I go back and I look at different things that happen in history because I love watching historical videos now that I have more context, now that I'm older. Even from 9/11, right? I went back and I watched videos from 9/11. And then in addition to that, I'll go back and I'll watch the videos from that last Japanese tsunami that absolutely devastated everything and destroyed so many people's lives. And it was just so bad. It was pretty much a national natural disaster, and it affected nuclear facilities and everything, right? And so I'm very thankful to live where I live. I think that even being in the Midwest is probably one of the safest places, even though it may not be ideal as far as weather. Having a home base in the Midwest is very, very blessed.
Fukushima nuclear disaster. But experts say because today's quake was near the
That's
surface,
crazy.
it will still have a big impact on land.
It's a shallow earthquake, 10 kilometers, and there will be a lot of shaking on land. And that shaking could lead to a destruction of buildings and also roads. And there is also been not a lot of communication because of power outages. So over the next few hours and maybe days, as rescue teams get into the area, we may well find that the major impact of this earthquake is on land and with collapsed buildings and perhaps people trapped and dying in that situation.
As fire rages in a city hit by the earthquake, the fear is what people in this part of Japan will find when they wake up tomorrow.
I couldn't imagine. Every video that I watched to try to understand this and see what was happening over in Japan, it seems like everybody knew exactly what to do immediately once it started happening. It's like they hit the floor, and they just made the adjustments. And it's almost like they just know what's going to happen because they're so used to it. I just couldn't permanently live in a space where this is something that could just happen as a regular natural occurrence, or as we continue to mess up what's happening out here in these streets. Shout out to Ash. I'm gonna read that super chat shortly. As we continue to pay attention to what's happening out here in these streets, as far as the ever evolving climates that we live in, or the rising of the sea levels, more hurricanes, and the hurricanes is even worse. A lot of these hurricanes have so much plastic in it from our pollution into the ocean, the rising of the sea levels, more mudslides than ever before, more volatile weather, decimation of what's going on as far as methane going into the air from, feeding of animals for human consumption, and overuse of fossil fuels, and how it's absolutely upending what's happening in other countries. A lot of people are not familiar because, like, I see people that say stuff all the time and they say, oh no, we love oil. We love our oil vehicles. And that's cool because I love mine too. But I am aware that the biggest polluters are first world countries like the United States of America and Japan and China, which then contributes to, and why the United Nations and huge countries are now compensating countries that are getting swallowed up, islands and countries that are getting swallowed up because they're the ones that are the most affected by the sea level rise and the melting of the ice caps that then affect what's going on in other countries. So we're very privileged in that we just go on and tear up everything, and we continue to grab up all of the oil, and we use the techniques in order to make our lifestyles better, but we don't really pay attention to how it's affecting other people. And because I'm aware of it, because I research that type of thing, I think about it a little bit differently. So when I'm trying to make a conscious decision or an educated decision in order to, try to figure out whether or not I'm making a right decision as an individual consumer in a global world, I take that into consideration. It's a lot of countries and a lot of places that are not first world. They may be third world, or they may not have the economic power that we have, or China or anything like that. And they're absolutely being decimated by what's going on as far as what we are doing over here or what they're doing over there. You never stand under the sign. I know you holding on to the railing, but you never stand up under the sign when an earthquake is coming. That's crazy.
一発目到着中、津波一発目到達中、萩原橋到達、萩原橋到達中。うわ。
When I was over in Japan in August of last year, They actually had a tsunami warning, even though nothing came of it. They actually had a warning, and we couldn't go over to certain other parts of Japan from Tokyo because they had a tsunami warning while we were there. Thankfully, nothing happened though. I see you, Max. Again, I just couldn't imagine going through it. So prayers up to the people over there in Japan. I don't have to necessarily be there in order to understand that humans are suffering and there will always be suffering in this world. And I'm just thankful that I don't have to deal with it. But at the same time, I don't want other people to be able to or to have to suffer more than they need to.